Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Eldred, and I'm with the Center for Best Practices. Thank you for joining us today for the Leverage Mobile Solutions to Increase Access to Summer Meals webinar. Before we get started, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. First, attendees are in listen-only mode, and we will be recording this webinar today. We will take questions during the webinar, so please use the question box for your questions, and we will read them out loud or respond to them individually. We will circulate the webinar recording and resources later this week. So without further ado, I would like to introduce my colleague, Derek Lambert, to start the webinar.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, and welcome to today's webinar, Leverage Mobile Solutions to Increase Access to Summer Meals. Just want to remind everybody, this is the second in the series of the Schools Out, Foods In webinar series. Today we'll be talking about mobile meals and ways to leverage mobile solutions to increase access to summer meals. Just want to note, based on the webinar calendar, that our next webinar after this will be on March 27th and will be on engaging the healthcare community. You can please see the dates and titles for all of the webinars through June. Registration is available on our website, which I'll get to in one minute. Before we go any further, I want to give a special thanks to our generous supporter, the Arby's Foundation, which makes this webinar series possible. And I mentioned our website. We'd like to highlight that the Center for Best Practices actually has a brand new website. If you visit the same URL, bestpractices.nokidhungry.org, you can view the new and beautiful layout for our resources, including school breakfast, summer meals, after-school meals, the No Kid Hungry Playbook, research, and our resource center, where you can search for all of the wonderful resources that are available online. So please visit our website, bestpractices.nokidhungry.org. I want to dive right into our agenda for the day. We are going to actually go back out to the audience and see who's in the audience, see what your relationship to mobile meals are, talk about some of the basics of the programs. We're going to introduce our featured panelists, get into a moderated discussion on some topics that we'll be talking about, including site selection, equipment for meal delivery and food safety, the importance of partnerships and budget forecasting and resources, and then we will get into the key takeaways of today's webinar. So first, I want to get into our poll question. Which statement most accurately describes your organization's familiarity with mobile meals? And we have 5 options. You've either successfully operated a mobile program, you've operated a mobile program but have experienced some difficulties, maybe that's why you're here. Perhaps you've considered mobile meals but have never started a program. Maybe you've never considered operating mobile meals but you're curious to learn more. Or perhaps you're here and you're like, what is this about? What are mobile meals? That's why I'm here. I want to learn about this to begin with. So we're going to launch a poll. Stephanie, if you could launch the poll for our attendees, we'll give folks about 10 or 15 seconds to respond. Again, the options are: we successfully operate, we have experienced difficulties, we've considered but have never started a program, we've never considered but are curious to learn more, or what are mobile meals? I have no idea. So Stephanie, let's give folks about 5 or 7 more seconds. Okay, and we are going to wait another 1 or 2 seconds here. Let's close the poll. And Stephanie, what results do we have?
All right, so it looks like we have about 30% that are saying that they are currently successfully operating a mobile meals program. There's 16% that operate a mobile meals program but experience difficulties. The highest is at 44% that have considered mobile meals but haven't started a program. And then we have 9% never considered mobile meals but curious to learn more. And lastly, 2%, what are mobile meals?
That's great. So it sounds like we have actually a majority of folks here who have experienced difficulties or have considered a program but never operated it. So we've really got a wide cross-section of folks. This is good to know. Let's get back to our slide deck and let's look at what mobile meals are. Mobile meals, for those of you who maybe are still learning about this, they are a strategy to reach more kids with summer nutrition by doing one of the following: either by delivering meals to sites where kids are congregated, but traditional or fixed sites, that kind of service isn't feasible. Second reason is to deliver kids to sites, transporting children to sites where meals are served that they would not be able to access otherwise. Or a third option, using mobile meals as a strategy to increase participation in locations where traditional site operation could be viable, but where other considerations take precedence, such as serving multiple locations in quick succession, boosting the cool factor with a food truck, are one of those things. So really, either by creating an additional incentive to participation, or in fact delivering meals to sites, or making sure children are able to access sites. So that's a little bit of a primer on mobile meals. But let's dig a little deeper with our audience and ask really, what is the primary interest for those of you on the line today in exploring or operating mobile meals? And let's get into that. Really, what are the barriers that you're seeing in your community? One, that families can't access existing sites due to barriers such as transportation. Number two, organizations provide activities already and they need us to deliver on-site meals. Number three, we're trying to enliven existing programming to attract more kids. Or four, other. And if you have something else that we didn't think of, if you could just type that into the chat box, that would be great, because we'd love to see what other things are going out there. So if you fall into other, vote there and then enter in the chat box something else. Let's give folks about 5 more seconds to vote. Okay, and we are going to close the poll. And Stephanie, what are we seeing there?
All right, so it looks like 60% answered families can't access existing sites. 7% voted organizations provide activities and need us to deliver on-site meals. 28% voted trying to enliven existing programs to attract more kids. And 5% voted other. That's
great. And some of the others here, seeing that looks like Terry wrote in that we're providing support for agencies doing SFSP, trying to figure out how to best support them. Noemi said all of the above. And then looks like folks are asking for recommending vendors to serve us lunches. So we've got a number of other factors in play. It looks like of our respondents, barriers around transportation are what most folks are experiencing, and that's what they're seeking to address with mobile meals. So that's some of the stuff that we'll be focusing on today. So it's great to hear from our audience about some of these items. Let's dive right in and welcome our panelists. Today we have 2 great panelists that are going to be a part of the conversation. We have Sean Mason, who is the operations manager at PepsiCo Food for Good. Sean has worked for 20 years with PepsiCo, and the last 6 with Food for Good, where he has helped to create a program in over 15 different cities and growing nationwide, focusing on partnerships and innovation. And we also have Bill Mingle, Supervisor of Nutrition Services at Seaford School District in Delaware. Bill received a Bachelor of Science in Hotel, Restaurant, and Institutional Management at Penn State. He has over 20 years of experience with the food service industry, including restaurants, clubs, contract corporate dining, government feeding programs, and child nutrition. He served as the food service manager for Talbot County Public School in Maryland for 5 years, where he implemented the summer food service program and expanded Maryland Meals for Achievement programs from 1 school to 3. He currently serves as a nutrition services supervisor at Seaford School District in Delaware, where he has piloted a mobile-based summer meals concept that began by serving over 8,600 meals and has expanded to over 21,000 meals, as we'll hear later. It's been so successful that he is planning expansion, which he will go into in just a moment. But without further ado, Sean Mason from PepsiCo Food for Good, thanks for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit about what your organization does?
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Derek. Really appreciate the opportunity to discuss one of the things that Food for Good holds very passionate in mobile meals. We came about mobile meals back in 2009, where we just put meals on a truck to see if we could solve community need in Dallas, and served 50,000 meals over the summer in our first year, and then have expanded that to many other cities beyond Dallas, and even reach coast to coast. The way that we do this is we look for some sort of financial business model that can sustain and scale within the federal reimbursement. So within that, it's just doing a big math problem to figure out how to get to kids, how to make it scalable, and how to work underneath the reimbursement. We are a vendor in this process. We are not a sponsor, and we are always looking for helping organizations reach new cities, reach kids that aren't being served currently. So really happy to be on here, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thanks so much, Sean. And I know we'll be diving into the conversation here in just a minute. Without further ado, though, I want to transition over to Bill Mingle from Seaford School District to talk about his program. Bill, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Derek. Thanks for having me. It's very nice to be here, and hopefully I can share some insights for everybody's questions they may have with mobile feeding, especially during the summertime. I want to talk just briefly about kind of past, present, and future. When I started here about 2 years ago, I inherited a food truck that was purchased just months before then, and so the challenge was to incorporate that food truck into the summer meals program. And it was challenging because honestly, I didn't know very much about a food truck or a food truck program at the time. And so I had to go do some research very quickly. We took some random shots and went to a couple different sites out in the community and found out we did very, very well, much better than what we thought we were going to do. We did about 8,100 meals that summer, and we really uncovered a need in the community, and we really found some layers that were peeled back that really needed to be addressed with child hunger, student hunger issues that were going on here in Seaford. So we started to game plan a little bit for what we were going to do, what I'm going to call present, which was really past summer here in 2017. And we really expanded, and we went from 3 sites to 11 sites and went to the deep corners of Seaford to really try and get our meals into places where students either didn't have access to getting the meals at the schools or just didn't have access to getting a meal, period. So we basically kind of took the meal to them was sort of our philosophy with that. We did so well. We knew we were taking kind of this massive step ahead of time from 81,000 meals, and we ended up serving a little over 21,000 meals last year. And what you got to keep in mind is Seaford community has 9,000 people in it, and our school district is 3,500 kids. So that's a very large amount to move up in 1 year. It was so much, and it was so impressive. We decided that we were going to go with a second food truck, and we want to further expand. We're hoping to get between 25 and 30,000 meals out this year, and we're looking at some efficiencies that are going to make us a little bit better in trying to accomplish that goal and service more kids in the Seaford area. So that's kind of where we are, past, present, and where we're going for here in about, only about 4 more months we'll be doing this. So that's the goal.
Thanks, Bill. We're going to pull up some of your pictures as well. That's a really great news to hear that you've gone from 8,000 meals, adding the second food truck, moving on and thinking about further expansion. Got some pictures there from your program, which I want to thank you for sending those. And at this time, we're going to dive right into a moderated panelist Q&A. We are going to be walking through some different elements of the topics that you've already mentioned, Sean and Bill, such as site selection and route planning, equipment for vehicle delivery and meal safety, partnerships and budget forecasting and resources. For those out in the audience, if you have a question or a comment at any time, please feel free to type those into the chat box. We really want this to be an interactive session with our panelists. So let us know if anything comes up. The question panel. Feel free to type into that. The question panel. Stephanie, my colleague, just corrected and said type into the questions, not the chat, and we will be sure to field those as we move forward. But just to go ahead and start the conversation, want to go to the next slide for site selection and really give a shout out for folks out there in the audience to the USDA Capacity Builder. This is a resource from the USDA Food and Nutrition Service, which if you're thinking about expanding your programs or program targeting about where to set up sites, where kids are, thinking about the eligibility, whether or not you're able to serve meals as an open site, any of these elements, you can really leverage the data layers that provide information about, the open site eligibility, where summer meal sites currently operate. It has information about where multifamily housing units may be, where congregations might be, faith communities may be present, other community facilities such as farmers markets, museums, and libraries. And also by clicking on the specific census tracts, it gives you an idea of the number of children that are actually present in that geography. So this is, really where your data analysis piece can come in, which it's not the last step in partnership. It's really the first step where you start to think about what are the different criteria that a given location might satisfy to begin thinking about meal service. And I would clarify, we're talking about mobile meals today, but something like the USDA Capacity Builder can be useful for anyone thinking about operating summer meals and that needs to dig into the data to think about where do I need to locate my sites, mobile or otherwise. And Bill, I really want to go ahead and kick this off with a question for you. I know not all of your sites are mobile sites. I do know that a good number of them are. What are some of the key criteria that you consider when selecting sites for meal service?
Okay, so we had 6 sites last year that were considered mobile sites with our food truck, and then we had 3 sites that were what we call drop and go sites, where we took our meals in our food vans and dropped off at certain locations, and that would come back an hour later and pick up the counts and the information that we need to get from the meal. What we're really looking for is, obviously, we got to find out where the kids are. That's obviously the most important part. We're looking for safety features. We're looking for places where kids can get out of the elements when they need to. If we're out there and a thunderstorm shows up, where can kids go? So we're looking for shelter and safety. Another thing that we look for is an actual place where the kids can go and enjoy their meal. Is there a park nearby? Is there a grassy area? Is there some kind of something that's going to hold kids? Is one of our partners at one of the sites, can they partner up with us and bring kids indoors to do crafts, to do activities with them? And then sometimes we had some of our partners would actually follow us from site to site, and they would do crafts. So as the kids came to the food truck, they would come out, get their meal, and then they go over to the bookmobile, and the bookmobile partners would have an activity, a craft for them to do there as well. So it has to, it's kind of like when you go to a restaurant, you want everything to look really nice, and you want to feel comfortable, and you try and do the same thing with the kids at the outdoor setting.
That's great, Bill. And Sean, I want to follow up with another question in your direction. Can you shed some light on your process for working with partners to identify good locations for mobile sites? And I want to roll in with that as well, Sean. Got a comment in from Paula, who was mentioning that one of the obstacles that her team faces with their food truck is satisfying the congregate component, the congregate meal requirement, which, for those of you that may be new to summer meals, requires that meals be consumed on site. So, Sean, I know you work with a lot of folks in a lot of different places. Can you shed some light on your general process for working with partners, and then maybe also comment about how your team navigates and satisfies the congregate meal requirement for mobile meals?
Yeah, absolutely. The way that we work with partners is really trying to help them identify not only the right location, but the right time. So are we getting to the location where the most kids are going to be able to participate? As we look at different sites, whether it's apartment complexes, parks, libraries, things like that, it's always understanding, are we showing up at the right time? So we look to see how we can maneuver our vans, where we can park, how we can get to those sites to be most effective. And I also think that whenever you're partnering with local organizations, it's also important to bring in the state. They might be able to help guide you in showing you to the right location or the right geography of where there's need, or other partners that have expressed desire of having mobile meals or other meals in that area. So that could be a really great connecting place there. The opportunity to have a congregate meal, one of the most effective strategies that we've seen is what's called a leapfrog. So teams of different volunteers and AmeriCorps will show up to a site, and they're called the A team. They will gather the kids, start to play games. The truck will show up, feed the meals there, and then the truck will leave. A team will stay at that location. As the truck is going to the new location, there's a B team. That team has already been on place and is going to be doing the same thing of getting the kids together and getting them ready for the meal. Truck shows up, meal gets served. Then as that truck's leaving, it's going to another site where the A team has leapfrogged over the B team and has gone to a new site. So that does take some coordination, but what it does is it allows a team of people to be on site during the meal, but before and after the meal. So it creates more opportunity for engagement of games, participation in other activities, and has been a really great strategy. The other strategies are that we do, if you cannot do any sort of leapfrog, is on our trucks we have activity sets where we have soccer balls and footballs and hula hoops and jump ropes and sidewalk chalk to be able to let the kids interact with those during the time that they're there. And when we're not serving a meal, after the kids get their initial meal, our drivers and staff actually go out and play games with kids. So there's different techniques that you can do to maintain congregate.
That's great, Sean. I had a follow-up question on that as well about recruiting those A and B teams. What does it look like in terms of getting folks, you know, it sounds like you mentioned AmeriCorps there. Are you seeing other strategies or other kind of likely suspects, folks who might want to be a part of that kind of initiative, being an A team, being a B team, securing steady volunteers over the course of the summer?
Sure, we've seen different strategies on that of definitely looking for college kids that need a summer job. That's always a great place to start, but also if you want to get more into the peer mentorship, there's a lot of high school kids that are looking for different activities to satisfy their social component when they're trying to get into college or finishing high school. So those would be starting points where I would go first.
Thanks so much, Sean. And we're actually going to move on. We got a couple questions. My colleague Stephanie is going to follow up with some of you who will be actually covering the topics that you've mentioned. So we'll follow up with you directly, and then also circle back to those questions as we move forward. At this time, we're going to move to the next slide, which is about route planning. Because we know that in addition to selecting sites, once you have selected sites, you got to figure out how you're going to get there, right? And how you're going to deliver the meals, or if there's an A team or a B team, how you're going to figure out what your path is going to be every day. And so one of the things I wanted to call people's attention to is that there actually is an online resource, again, from USDA that can really help with route planning. It's the USDA SFSP and CACFP Route Planner. And just as an example, I pulled up some locations in and around the Memphis, Tennessee area. One is what your route would look like if you just kind of pick sites at random. And then actually on the right there, if you click on an optimized route, it gives you a route delivery that is the most efficient in terms of timing and distance. In the case that we have here, it would save drivers about 35 minutes a day one way to deliver the meals. This is just an example. There's other software, there are other tools out there online. Just want to call attention to this free resource to help folks think about route planning. But also want to go back again to our panelists. And Sean, want to go back to you and say, what is a common mistake when you're working with partners, when you're trying to put these programs in place, that you see folks making as they begin to consider planning for their delivery routes?
I think the first thing that they miss is how much loading and unloading time it takes, not only at the sites, but actually before the route leaves and after the route ends. So there's significant time of getting everything ready and then getting everything delivered and then getting everything settled at the end of the day. So those are the major things that are missed. Most of the time, if you go into Google Maps or other locations, if you're driving a truck, you are not moving as fast as a car. So just understand that those times are going to be not the same. The driving a van is going to be a little bit longer than what you would anticipate from Google. So those would be the main things. From a financial standpoint, understanding the number of meals that you can do on that truck to make that worthwhile is definitely tied into planning that route. So make sure that you are covering the costs of that truck. You really need to understand how many meals are being served off that truck each day.
Yeah, so Sean, what I'm hearing, just to confirm, sounds like you need to make sure that that truck is going to have the capacity in terms of meal service to actually cover the expenses on an ongoing basis. Can you give an example of something maybe you've seen that really reflects that?
Yeah, we plan out our routes to cover the cost of that route. There's other opportunities where you have had 10 sites on a route, and we cover that cost. And then There's other ones, and that takes the whole day. And then there's other ones that operate only for a few hours. But since they have added volume and added meals, they cover that cost in a much shorter time. So again, it's just about understanding your total day of what that truck is going to be doing.
That's great, Sean. And Bill, I want to come over to you and ask, thinking about planning routes. I know that you were operating in Seaford, which is, as you mentioned earlier, a relatively small community. So I know the distances involved may not be as large as in some cases. But what are, as you begin to plan your routes and think about what the day is going to look like in getting to those sites and ensuring service, what are some best practices that your team has developed to ensure that that process operates smoothly?
That's a good question. I'm going to throw a couple of buzzwords out here. Teamwork, probably consistency, and reliability. Our truck is a two-man operation. So when the truck pulls up, we have one person who goes up top and starts getting the food together out of either the cooler or the hot boxes and starts putting the bags together. And then we have a person down below who actually is the counter and starts distributing the meals and make sure that the students, the children all have their beverage and any extras they may have. That consistency between the teamwork, that cohesion, is absolutely critical, that it runs very, very smoothly from top to bottom into the child's hands, so we keep the lines moving constantly. Any kind of disruption, the lines can build up pretty quickly. You have to be consistent, I believe, in your delivery of the meal. If you say you're going to be there at 11:30, you have to be there at 11:30. Probably more important, you have to be ready to go and be serving by 11:30, because the kids and the parents are getting their kids there, come to these sites, these activities that are sponsoring at the site. They want to get their meal and they want to get to the next activity that they're there for. And then, just like I say, just reliable. You can't mess around with the schedule too much. I really like what the route plan that you put out here. It is kind of comical. We took a page from, like everybody knows, FedEx. We try not to make any left-hand turns. We try and make everything with a right-hand turn because, as Sean mentioned, trucks are much bigger. They're slower. They're a little more. They're not as agile as cars are on the highway. So we try and make things safe for all involved with that. So with that planned delivery routes, what we try and do is start our farthest point away from our central kitchen. So we will load up the truck with as many meals that we think we'll need for the next stop or two. And then we're fortunate in Seaford, we have some food vans that we can run back and forth and shuttle food from the production kitchen to the food truck. So when the food truck leaves, it doesn't come back to the central kitchen at any time. It's out there for the rest of the day. And that enables us to batch cook food and make sure the food is always hot, it's always fresh, or it's always cold if it's meant to be cold. We do things that we don't have freezers on our food truck, but we serve frozen sorbets. You got to keep those cold. So we're constantly shuttling product back and forth between the truck and the production kitchen to try and keep the meal service smooth, to keep it authentic, and keep the routes running as smooth as possible.
That's great, Bill. Thank you. And we've got a couple of questions in here as you guys have been talking and asking about the congregate requirement and if there's any possibility for flexibilities there. And I just want to clarify as we're going through the conversation that the congregate meal requirement is something that is currently, that is a USDA requirement. This is not something that state agencies or sponsors currently have flexibilities on. There have been periods during which that was considered for change. One notable event of that was child nutrition reauthorization in 2015 into 2016. We did not experience any changes to the legislation governing the program or subsequent regulations. So as we're going through this conversation, just know that meals as currently understood need to be consumed on site, and that's the nature of the conversation that we're engaging in. Sean, I want to go back to you. Thinking about, in just a moment, we're going to move forward and think about the specific equipment that's needed for these programs. But what have you seen in terms of meal delivery and drop-off? Are you seeing all of the meals being delivered separately? Are you seeing, dropping off more than one meal at a time for storage on site? What are some different options people may have in terms of actually delivering meals to locations? Do they need to make a couple of rounds for every meal service, or is there the possibility of delivering more than one meal at a time to then be served either that day or the next morning?
So it's a great question, Derek. What I would ask is just for the participants to understand that the requirements are going to be much different for hot, cold, or shelf-stable meals. And it's all going to depend on what infrastructure you have at each site that can help dictate how many meals you can drop off. So there's programs where we can drop off a week's worth of meals, which is a combination of fresh meals, fresh components throughout the week, and then some shelf-stable entrees so that it can lessen the cost of getting out into rural areas. And then there's other places where we can drop off a high-quality cold meal that can service 2 days, as long as the site has a proper refrigeration. And then I'm sure as Bill would agree, there's other areas where if you have a warmer at a site, you can drop off the hot meal and maybe even a snack. So there's opportunities to drop off multiple meals, lower your cost of logistics by doing that. It just takes knowing and understanding the infrastructure that you have at each site. When you move on to a truck and understand the infrastructure that you need on a truck to deliver those meals, PepsiCo Food for Good has often referred to our cooler as the cold box. So it's something that keeps food cold 8 to 12 hours, but it needs to be frozen altogether in the freezer and requires that special infrastructure back at your production kitchen. But there's other ways that you can have meals delivered cold, hot to sites on a truck, even if that truck does not have any refrigeration capabilities.
That's great, Sean. I know we could probably go further into that, and if folks have questions, we'll be happy to return to that. Do want to move on to a conversation about equipment in terms of the equipment that's being used to transport the meals. So on this slide, just have several examples here. I know some of the programs that we're highlighting, folks in the line are actually attending who were associated with these programs. So we know out in Garrett County in Maryland, they used mobile food trailers rather than food trucks. They used the USDA Community Facilities matching grants to actually pay for these. One key element of this, serving out of a trailer, is that there's no CDL license required, so they actually have a wider berth in terms of who can drive the vans or the trucks that are carrying the trailers. I have contact information there for Scott Germain, who's the F&S manager. In Hopkinsville, the YMCA in Kentucky, they did a van delivery of meals with service at outdoor sites, at picnic tables, at community facilities. Have Ed Wallace, who is a great contact there, who helped manage that program, get it off the ground, and is available as an anti-hunger consultant. Bill, we've got your program here, mobile food truck with the van relays that you mentioned, and also wanted to give folks an idea of working with UPS or public bus to ensure delivery. Food for People in California worked with the Humboldt Transit Authority to transport lunches every weekday on southbound buses, and with UPS buses that were driving eastbound. They delivered coolers to communities. The delivery driver loaded the coolers onto the buses at different bus stops and to the UPS offices, and volunteers unloaded the coolers and transported them to sites. And collectively, the staff and volunteers drove almost 500 miles a day, delivering meals to distribution sites. And really the point here is, what are the assets that are already available in the community? What are the unique partnerships that can be allocated or reallocated to address community needs? And, Bill, I want to talk with you. This is one of the programs we have highlighted here. How did you hit upon your current mobile meals delivery model? You mentioned about the food truck and the van relays. How did you settle on that? And what were some others that you considered? And kind of what was your cost benefit analysis to finally hit on this model to serve the community?
I kind of fell into it, to be honest with you. Like I say, when I was hired here, we had just purchased a food truck months before. And I was charged with the task of getting it implemented into the summer food service program. So I really just buried my nose in books and got online and started seeing how we could, implement this program mobily. Found out it was relatively easy to do. You just, the hard part's getting the asset, of course, getting the truck. And then, from there, it's just like planning for summer food service program, but you're doing it mobily as opposed to a traditional setup where the schools are open for summer school. what it proved to Seaford that the mobile aspect was definitely the way to go. There really is no other option trying to reach as many kids as we've been reaching. If you do the schools are allowed to then kind of shut down for summertime, which saves operationally on the school district as well. So it's a win-win for us. It has snowballed from the first year to this year into what we're projecting for next year, where I thoroughly believe that the mobile aspect is the trend, is the way to go with summer programming. It does involve a little different commitment and a little different discipline when you're planning for this, because you can go, you're not handcuffed by the school saying we're doing summer school for 4 weeks, and so for 4 weeks you do your meals. We go pretty much, summer to me is the day after school's out until the days before school starts. So we really try and maximize that time of summer. We stretched out to 7, 8, 9 weeks if we can. Depending on how the school calendar might be set up, we might be able to do 10 weeks. Who knows? But being mobile like this, it gives you a lot of options to pursue to really try and reach those kids that really desperately need the meals.
That's great, Bill. And we got a comment in from Keith wanting to know more about the Community Facilities Grant Program. And Keith, we will be returning to that later with some links for information. And Bill wanted to follow up. Tanya had a question about the approval of the truck. Did you have to go through any, what were the steps you walked through in terms of working with your local health department to be approved for service out of your food truck?
Okay, so that, you kind of got me in between, in golf, you got me in between clubs there. That came on right before I started, and I'm about to go through that process now with the second food truck that will be coming online. My understanding of it is that the truck does have to be approved by the state at which that is, and I could be wrong, but this is what I've been told, that has to be approved by the state at which it's produced in. So the truck is being made currently in New Jersey, so it's going to meet New Jersey health codes, and then when it comes down here, then I will invite Delaware health code officials out to review it. That's a volunteer suggestion, to get the health board on your side, as opposed to them coming out to you halfway through your program. They say, oh, we don't know anything about this. The other thing is, for summer food service program, you have to write a letter to the Board of Health indicating that you're going to be operating these sites and how you're going to be operating the sites. So they're going to know that you have a food truck in this circumstance. So the word gets out that way. But I definitely would take the high road and put your best foot forward and invite them to come out to clear the truck.
Yeah, that's great, Bill. And what I'm hearing there is, if you're trying, if you're upgrading your service, or you're bringing on a vehicle, engaging with the health department, engaging with the state agency to make sure all the ducks are in a row. That makes a lot of sense. Sean, I want to touch base with you. I know you've seen these programs and perhaps several different permutations. What are the factors, based on your experience, that folks should be considering when they're presented with these different potential models that could be used to deliver meals?
I would first ask, is this going to be a sustainable way to operate? Is this going to be something that is going to be able to be utilized throughout the year, or is this just summer? So if you have a food truck, what else can it do the rest of the year? I've seen places like Austin Independent School District, they actually did a food truck so that they could use it as a spare emergency kitchen throughout the school year, and then they use that truck for summer meals. And so there's different ways that you could do things like food trucks, but also if you're just looking at how summer meals is done, make sure that it's something that can sustain with people throughout the whole year, people throughout the whole summer, and then sites throughout the summer that are going to operate as much as possible to take away any of the sites that fluctuate, whether only open a few weeks or a few days a week.
Thanks, Sean. And we got a comment from, yeah, that's great. And we got a comment in from Paula talking about, the difference in something people might want to consider, whether is the food truck or mobile meal vehicle going to be holding food, or is there going to be cooking on site? That the criteria may be different there as well, and working with the local health department. So for folks out there, as you're considering these these are some different things to consider in terms of what your goals are, in terms of transporting the meals, in terms of preparing them on site, and some of the different, what that might indicate in terms of working with the state agency and the health department. But what I'm hearing from you, and I think something that we see as a general best practice and work with our partners, is it's best to engage the relevant agency or department early on so that you can be clear about what those expectations are. And since we're talking about, some of the food and the safety and the equipment, we'll move on to our next slide about some of the equipment that's needed to ensure food safety. And Sean, I'd love to hear you, based on your work with partners, what are some of the must-haves that folks need to think about in terms of food safety? What are some things that, if you're going to get into this business, you definitely have to have on hand, ready to use to make sure that you're in compliance and that the food stays safe?
Well, it definitely goes back to the pictures that you have here. One of the first things is a thermometer. You have to be able to know what your food is at temperature throughout the entire delivery process, whether it's leaving the kitchen, on the truck, or just before it's being served. You have to be able to know and understand what that temperature is, and knowing and understanding where those temperatures need to be, whether it's hot food or cold food. And part of the other pictures, the different coolers at Cambros, it's also understanding the duration of time that you need to hold that food. So if you're delivering to a site and all you need to do is have a couple of coolers and you're delivering 50 meals and you can put that in a car and deliver that out, how long do you need to keep that cold? If you need to keep it cold for only an hour or two, then there's, ice or some other freezer packs in a standard Coleman or Igloo cooler should be plenty to keep a meal cold for that time. But if you need a much longer time, you just have to vet out your equipment can hold that duration.
That's a good point, Sean. And something, we just did a cursory research here and thinking about the different pieces. The food thermometer, which you mentioned, you can find those for $5 on Amazon or at the, in stores. And then these coolers can really run the gamut, right? From $15 or $20 all the way up to, we found some at $200 or even more. Can you talk about the scale of the investment based on your needs in terms of what you see and how much folks should be budgeting for these kinds of investments based on what their delivery is going to look like?
Yeah, and you don't give it enough justice for a Cambro. A Cambro can cost much more than $200. And if you look at the entire industry of where you can get coolers or insulated bags, they can provide a different strategy for you on how you deliver. So there might be opportunities to use something like a Igloo or Coleman cooler, but they aren't as durable as you might think if you're going to use them on a daily basis. Everyone knows that they're pretty durable when you use them 3 or 4 times a year for a picnic, but when you're using them every day and people are handling them in and out of trucks and at sites, handles break off pretty much within the first few weeks. So if you are looking at equipment, look at the durability of it for your use. How badly is it going to be beaten? And then understand the other thing when it comes to food safety, how often you have to clean it and what you can clean it with. So there's going to be some insulated bags that the outside will be dirty and the inside will be clean. Same with coolers. But knowing and understanding those different requirements is really going to help you in deciding what sort of equipment you have that can fit your need. And then, so duration is a key, but also durability.
That's great, Sean. And what I'm hearing is, if you really need to make a big investment in a highly durable item, you may need to spend even more than a couple $100s, maybe spend significantly more than that. Or if you're going to make some of investments in some of the things that we see there, you may not get by with just one iteration. You may have to go out and buy new materials, which will drive up your costs. So it sounds like that's part of the equation that folks want to think through.
Absolutely.
And Bill, can you give us an idea of the equipment that you started out with? I know you mentioned your program started in 2016. You're looking at expansion. What's some of the stuff you started out with? And as your program has evolved, what are some upgrades that you either have already invested in or that you're considering investing in?
Yeah, certainly. So we started off with the food truck, and it's a great food vehicle. It has warmer boxes. It has refrigerator boxes. So we don't do any production per se on the truck. We transport everything out of the central kitchen and then deliver it directly to the site. That worked for the first year that we did. Then we realized that we had other opportunities to get into some different locations. Either they were too tight to get a food truck into due to the size of the vehicle, or we just thought that we could maximize. We weren't forecasting those sites to be that large, and we could maximize the food truck in a greater venue. And so we had to come up with a concept called drop and go. And we had to utilize vans. So we had to go out and buy some vans, just small TransConnect vans that we use to transport the food from the central kitchen to those particular drop and go sites, or they supplied the food truck, like I said, out there, so the truck doesn't have to come back and reload. The vans we equipped with Cambros, and as Sean said, yeah, $200 for a Cambro is a steal. The Cambros are pretty expensive. We had to buy those, so that was a little bit of an investment for us, and we designated those into hot food storage and cold food storage. And so we would be able to drop those containers off at the site, and at which point the sponsors were able to open up the boxes and hand out the food accordingly. We've since then, we kind of realized that the time frame, we were getting out to maybe a little too early in the morning and a little too late in the afternoon. So we had to kind of tighten up the time frame, become a little more efficient. And as Sean alluded to earlier, you got to pick the right time, not only the location where the kids are at, but you got to pick the right time when the kids are there. And we started identifying that need early on, about halfway through the summer, that we need to get closer to a more traditional noon hour lunch. And we didn't know how to, we just didn't know how to approach that with only one food truck. And so we decided, the second food truck would, increase that efficiency of doing more kids around the lunchtime than being out there at 10:15 in the morning or being out there at 2:45 in the afternoon. And so that's where we're going with the food truck. And the second food truck is going to be identical to the first food truck, with the exception that there'll be a freezer. And as I said earlier, we have a partnership with a local farmer that does fresh sorbets. And so we're hoping to be able to use that freezer for those sorbets, so we can hand more of those sorbets out to the kids when it gets really hot. We like the design, the layout of the food truck that we have. We had to go through a bid process, and we had a couple different vendors submit bids. And there are some different types of food trucks. You have to be careful as to what you want. Do you want a food truck that's kind of like what you see at a fair, county fair, where they pull everything out and they produce everything right there on the truck and hand it out to you? Or as one of the viewers mentioned, you got to determine, are you going to be dropping and serving the food, or are you going to be producing the food off the truck? And a couple different layouts, a couple different designs where we're kind of making our decision on that.
That's a great point. And we're actually going to think about some of the different pieces that folks are going to be considering for their program when we think about partnerships. But before we dive right into that, I wanted to make a couple notes. Rachel Moeller from Florida mentioned that, wanted us to clarify, she works with the state agency there and wants to clarify that coolers are an allowable expense for the summer food service program. So you can use those SFSP dollars to invest in the coolers and the Cambros. And that while you can't use those dollars to purchase a vehicle, they can be used to retrofit vehicles for service. So that's a great point, Rachel. Thanks for calling that out. And without further ado, want to really also look at the importance of partnerships in mobile meals and how working with other partners can help us amplify or impact programs. And for that, I want to bring in a special guest, Josh Mathismeyer, Director of Nutritional Services at Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools. He oversees child nutrition programs for a district of 23,000 students in a low-income area and enjoys implementing these strategies to address the needs of a diverse community. He works with, this was a program that he's going to mention that was part of the FRAC Champs Initiative, FRAC and National League of Cities, which is working to reduce childhood hunger by expanding participation in federally subsidized after-school and summer meals programs. Josh, I know that your program was associated with a grant there in Kansas to expand partnership. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll look forward to hearing a little bit about the story and then also how partnerships have played a key role in your expansion of the mobile meals model.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me. Like you said, my name is Josh Mathismeyer. I'm the Director of Nutritional Services here at Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools. We're an urban school district here in Kansas. We have approximately 23,000 students, 53 schools, and during the school year, we serve on average about 32 or 33,000 meals a day. As we are in a very low-income area, we also have a very thriving summer meal program. Over the past several years, we've had upwards of 40 to 42 sites. And one of the issues that we have been working on is what are the barriers to keeping families and kids from participating with us during the summer. And this conversation started as a part of a CHAMPS grant. And so Kansas was one of the states that was selected for this grant, and we worked with our local health department to our local health department to put together a proposal to address the barriers. So we first started to think to ourselves, what are the barriers that we have to getting kids to participate during the summer? I mentioned that we do about 32,000 meals a day during the school year. During the summer, depending on whether summer school is in or not, we go from 8,000 meals a day during the summer when summer school is in to 2,000 to 3,000 meals a day after summer school ends through our community sites. And so when we started talking about those big discrepancies and how do we close the gap, we started to identify what are those barriers. The barriers we identified, and we're here on a call talking about mobile meals, is transportation. I think that's a huge barrier in any community, but no matter how big the county or the city that you're within. That's a huge barrier, especially in our area. And so that was, barrier number one that we talked about. And barrier number two was, how do we incentivize parents, guardians, mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunt, community friend to want to bring their children, the students, to participate in our summer meal programs? And those were the two barriers that we looked to address. And so the barrier of transportation was first when it came to describing our grant proposal, which was a mobile meal proposal. So we proposed to take an existing vehicle that we have within our school district, which is shown on the screen right now. It was a mobile library bus, and it was put out to pasture. It was not working. It was not functional. I had been approached by our transportation director on, is this something that we want? We're thinking about disposing of it. And this all kind of fell together at the same time. The grant came out. The transportation director came to me, and we said, hey, why not? Let's put together a proposal, and that's what we did. So through the proposal, there were several different pieces of it. First was forming a task force, a community task force to identify and be the driving force of not only the food truck of where it's going to go and what times and who are these sites and where are they and how would we select them. So we rallied a group of community members as our on the ground assets to help us filter through some of that. So we sat around the table and took a map of our school district boundary and drew a circle and said, okay, where is our biggest need within our county? We drew a circle, and within that circle, we said, all right, what sites are already existing? And so we plotted those sites and said, okay, within this circle, where are the gaps? And within those gaps, are there any areas that we can target for a mobile meal vehicle? And that's sort of how we developed, the sites that we ended up going towards. The mobile vehicle was retrofitted by our in-house transportation department. They did a fantastic job at half the cost it would have been if we would have gone out to a public or a non-related industry. We also had a design contest to help design the exterior of the vehicle. And so we wanted some buy-in from our students and our community when it came to this vehicle, and also get some positive marketing going on. And so we had a design contest that all of our students were able to submit designs to our our team, our mobile task force, to determine, what was the design that we were going to pick. So we got everything from a really cute drawing from a preschooler, a kindergartner, to, something done by a high school student. And we had 2 or 3 that were really, really good that we're considering, and we ultimately decided on the one that is shown before you. And it was submitted by actually a 7th grade student at one of our middle schools, and you can see her there. And that's myself with our superintendent and a county commissioner. And we had a media blowout where we went to her school and we invited her family and friends and all of the students there, and we had media out there. We did some live interviews. I don't think I've ever seen a 7th grader so nervous to be on TV. But it was just a great event, and it really got the ball rolling for our summer meal programs. And the food truck that we had served meals in 4 locations: a spray park, a farmer's market, a public park, actually 2 public parks. And not only did that vehicle serve 2,000 meals, but I think through a lot of the partnerships that we developed and the positive media that we had surrounding this vehicle, we were able to increase our total meals over the summer by 10,000, which is very significant from our standpoint.
That's great, Josh. And, this makes me think, and we're going to advance the slides here by a couple and think about some of the resources that are out there. And Josh, it sounds like when you were thinking about your investments, you reached out and used a donated vehicle, a depreciated vehicle, to be able to, make an investment in your mobile meals. You leveraged your in-house transportation department to do some of the work that needed to happen. And we heard earlier about the community facilities grant that was used for the trailer program. And Bill, I'd love for you to go just briefly. We only have a couple of minutes here, but if you could talk about how, you were actually able to leverage some of your dollars from your child nutrition programs to cover allowable costs associated with some of the program investments you made as well. Is that right? Bill, are you there?
There he is.
I'm sorry, I got caught up there. So yeah,
that's good.
Yeah, to answer your question, yes, it was.
That's great. So thinking about some of the, the surpluses that people may have in the balance of their child nutrition programs, some of the allowable costs they may be able to cover. For that, I would definitely encourage folks to consult directly with their state agencies to make sure that, any of those investments in the program are allowable. But also to think about what are depreciated resources we may have, what is the in-house expertise that may be available, and also, to really take that into account with budgeting. And Sean, I know that we are running short on time here, but we talked, as we talked before the call, getting folks to isolate, elements of their budget that may be concerning, areas where there may be overruns, to really build in those costs so that when they go from forecast to actuals, they still really hit those numbers they need to be at to make the program sustainable. And we have resources we're going to send out on that. I was going to see if you had any final thoughts about budgeting, Sean, that you might want to share related to tools that you use, either from No Kid Hungry or other resources you may have in-house.
Yeah, I think the section that you have on best practices for the calculator was a great start, and people just need to start with that 386 of reimbursement that's going to be out there and do the math backwards. How many meals you're going to do, how much is it going to cost you, and as long as you're not in the negative, that's great. So just do some math and try and make sure that you're understanding everything around labor and food costs.
That's great, Sean. And some of the takeaways that I'm seeing here, and we'll circulate the slide deck in the recording of the webinar, is to really think about what are your existing resources, what is an adaptation of the capacity and the need, to make sure that your mobile program is right-sized in terms of what you have at your disposal, the budget that you have, making sure that thorough budget planning feeds into that program, and then thinking about the financial, the in-kind, the programmatic partnerships that are going to allow the program to be successful. These are great points. I know we got some additional questions that we'll circle back with, but at this time, want to conclude the webinar. We will follow up with additional resources that were mentioned during the call. I want to thank our panelists, Sean, Bill, and Josh, for being a part of it, and want to encourage folks to join us next month as we talk about engaging the healthcare community to support summer meals. It's going to be on Tuesday, March 27th at 2 p.m. Eastern. Bill, John. Josh, thank you so much. Thanks to our audience for taking part. Thanks to Stephanie for managing the webinar technology and the polls. Have a great day, everyone. We'll send out resources shortly and look forward to touching base again next month. Have a great day.
Great. Thank you.